Hi guys, today we're talking about the Goliad Massacre. You'll need your history composition book and something to write with. Like always, feel free to pause or rewind the video as needed. The Goliad Massacre is another pivotal point in the Texas Revolution. Now, just by the name, we have a pretty good idea of how this will turn out and who the winner is, but let's go through the story anyway. This is the mission of La Bahia in Goliad, Texas. It was originally a Spanish mission, but at the time of the Texas Revolution, it was being used as a fort called Fort Defiance. Here's the basic structure of the fort. This is the chapel inside the fort. Colonel James Fannin was the Texan in charge of about 400 men, mostly volunteers, there at Fort Defiance. Fannin had tried to answer Travis's call for help at the Alamo, but the wagons broke down en route to San Antonio, and Fannin and his men were forced to return home. After the defeat of the Texans at the Alamo, Santa Anna ordered General Urrea to head to Goliad to destroy the Texas army there. Fannin began to make preparations to defend the fort. Major General Sam Houston is the commander of the Texas Army, similar to the role George Washington played in the American Revolution. After hearing what had happened at the Alamo, Houston ordered Fannin to leave Goliad immediately so the same thing wouldn't happen to Fannin's troops. Fannin was told to meet Sam Houston and his soldiers north of the Colorado River, where they could regroup and make a new plan. Sam Houston basically says two things. 1, leave now, and 2, destroy or leave your cannons behind. Fannin does not leave right away. He actually waits 8 full days before finally leaving. Remember, Urrea and his men are already on the way when Houston contacts Fannin. So 8 days later, the Mexican army is really close to Goliad, and even more Mexican soldiers are on the way. Fannin also disobeyed the other part of the order. Don't bring the cannons. These are actually full-size cannons, not the pocket-sized cannons like at Gonzales. These are very heavy and would really slow the group down. So what does Fannin do? Hey, don't forget the cannons. Fannin and his men make it 6 miles to the edge of Colledo Creek before Urrea's army catches up with them. 6 miles. Should have left earlier, not that we're saying I told you so. Fannin's men fight bravely, but then even more Mexican soldiers arrive. They are incredibly outnumbered, about 400 Texans to now 1,500 Mexican soldiers. Fannin knows he can't win, and he wants to reduce the number of men who will die. He agrees to surrender to Urrea, not knowing that Santa Anna had ordered all the Texans to be killed. Take no prisoners. 9 Texans die and 60 are injured in the Battle of Colledo Creek, but they managed to kill 200 Mexican soldiers during the battle. The surviving Texans are rounded up and marched back to Fort Defiance, 6 miles away. General Urrea had a conscience, and he did not agree that all survivors should be killed. Rather than stand up to Santa Anna, Urrea made an excuse and left, leaving Portilla in charge. Portilla received the same orders and a deadline: kill them all by the next morning. On March 27, 1836, the remaining Texans were divided into 3 groups and marched down the 3 roads leading from the fort. They were killed by firing squad. If you could not march due to the injury, you were killed inside. You don't need to write down the quote, but it helps us to know what happened. At selected spots on each of the 3 roads, the 3 groups were halted. Upon a given signal, the guards fired upon the prisoners at a range too close to miss. Nearly all were killed at the first fire. Those not killed were pursued and slaughtered by gunfire or bayonet. Fannin and any wounded Texans unable to march were put to death within the fort. They saved a special death for Fannin as commander. He was blindfolded, taken to the courtyard outside of the chapel, and placed in a chair. He had 3 requests. 1, shoot me in the heart. 2, send my belongings to my family. 3, give me a Christian burial. These seem reasonable, right? One commander to another. A little respect. Instead, Fannin was shot in the face. his possessions were taken and divided among the Mexican soldiers, and his body was burned alongside all the other Texans murdered that day. Now, in any tragedy, we can usually find a bright side. There was a woman named Francisca Alves. She was the wife of a Mexican army officer. She thought the executions were wrong, so she convinced her husband to spare 20 of the prisoners. Because of this, she is known as the Angel of Goliad, and the statue you see there is at the monument at Goliad to the fallen Texans. Speaking of which, this is the monument to the fallen Texans at Goliad. Have any of you been there and seen it in person? Next up, the runaway scrape and the Battle of San Jacinto. Stay tuned for another video soon.